Hello and welcome to another video from me, this tutor. In this video I'm going to talk you through all the key knowledge and all the key content you need to know about the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so before I talk you through all the key content, just a reminder that I have lots and lots of revision guides full of tutoring videos on how to answer questions to a top level, going through all the criteria, and do look at these videos to help you progress through your GCSE exams. Now, let's talk about the content in detail. The first thing we need to know about Treaty of Versailles is about the big three, the three people who were involved in setting up the treaty. Often these are called the peacemakers, and there have been exam questions that refer to them as the peacemakers. So first we have France and their leader, Georges Clemenceau. Now, what did he want? He wanted France to weaken Germany. Germany had invaded France in 1871 with the Franco-Prussian War and had taken Alsace-Lorraine. Germany had a larger population, 75 million versus France's 40 million, and a stronger army. So they wanted to reduce the threat Germany posed to France. Also, Germany was to pay reparations to France. France had been heavily damaged by the invasion of Germany during the First World War. 300,000 homes were destroyed, 6,000 factories destroyed, 8,000 square miles of farmland wasted. So Clemenceau wanted money to repair this. Now, knowing one or two of those facts is really useful to help you set out your ideas about their aims. The 300,000 homes, for instance, nice, easy example to remember. Clemenceau was a realist, though, and he knew he would not get a total weakening of Germany, as he would have to compromise with Britain and France. But he did go into Treaty of Versailles being quite aggressive and demanding what he wanted. David Lloyd George was the British Prime Minister. His first aim was some punishment. Lloyd George had just won an election in Britain, and one of the things that was there was a promise to make Germany pay for the war. But in reality, he wanted a much fairer peace. He wanted to find more of a middle ground than Clemenceau. He did not want Germany punished too heavily, as he did not want a vengeful Germany that wanted to go into the international world angry and wanting revenge. So David Lloyd George's second aim was to rebuild Britain and to keep Germany quite powerful to help with this. Germany was Britain's second largest trading partner, and Germany was able to trade and buy things from Britain, which helped Britain pay off their significant debts to the Americans that they'd gained during the First World War. Britain also wanted to remove Germany's naval power. Germany had threatened Britain before the First World War with the naval race and had threatened Britain's empire before the First World War. So they wanted to remove Germany threatening in these ways. And the third person is Woodrow Wilson, the American president. His aim was to create peace in Europe with the 14 points. He didn't want America involved in any more European entanglements, as they called it, and wanted to try and resolve the warlike European attitude. To do this, Wilson refused to cancel French and British debts from the war to make sure that in the peace treaty, the French and British were a bit more on side with Americans. So he had a bargaining chip to make sure Britain and France behaved. He feared a harsh treaty would lead to Germany wanting revenge in the future. But he did agree that Germany needed some punishment. They were quite aggressive in the build-up to the First World War. So he wanted to create world peace as well as his second aim. So Woodrow Wilson was the president of the USA, and he was an idealist. He wanted to solve the problems of Europe to stop future wars by following these 14 points. He believed in democracy, an end to empire. This idea of self-determination was a very key part of his 14 points. Each national group should have their own nation, which would maybe stop wars of independence and border wars, etc. And he wanted countries to work together to keep peace with what he called the League of Nations. So, bearing in mind these different aims and how they were not very compatible with each other, how did the peace treaty go? Did they have disagreements? Could they make compromises? So firstly, Clemenceau disagreed with Wilson over the weakening of Germany. France had suffered a lot. The Americans hadn't suffered so much. They had different views. So Wilson did make some compromises. He agreed that the Rhineland should be neutral or demilitarized, so the Germans could not protect their own border or threaten France with soldiers on their border. And the Saarland should go to France for 15 years to help the French rebuild after the war. In return, France agreed to the self-determination of Eastern Europe, so that the Austro-Hungarian Empire, parts of Russia, part of Germany, were split up into new nations to give Poland a nation, to give the Czechs and Slovaks a nation, to give Hungary its freedom, etc. So these new nations were created. Britain disagreed with some of the 14 points as well. Unsurprisingly, the free access to the sea was something Britain didn't really support. Britain wanted to have control of the sea, and the Navy wanted control of the areas around Britain and its empire. Also, the idea of freedom for all people threatened the idea of the British Empire and suggested that there should be freedom for the colonies of Britain. So what were the main terms of the treaty in the end that they agreed upon? So often many teachers talk about the idea of doing lamb. It's not really an ideal set of words. I'll give you some of the alternative words as well as we talk through it, but it does give you a sort of useful reminder of the 4 key areas to consider. So L is land. So they lost around 15% of their land. 6 million Germans were into other countries. Places they lost could include Alsace-Lorraine, the Polish corridor, and all foreign colonies. So obviously the Polish corridor split Germany, so it's quite a significant part. East Prussia ends up being separate from the rest of Germany, and that's very contentious, and the Germans do not like this. But for Poland it was very important because it gave them access to the sea, so they could have a seaport as part of their new nation. Another piece of land that went was Silesia, as you can see in the map there, and that had lots of industrial areas as well, so that was quite a significant loss, but it gave Poland some useful resources. Now all this land loss, as you can see, loses 6 million Germans to other countries, which Hitler, when he comes to power in the 1930s, is very unhappy about and tries to resolve. The army was only to be 100,000 soldiers. No conscription was allowed, so conscription is forced military service. That was not allowed. No tanks, no air force. Only 6 battleships and 15,000 sailors were allowed, and no U-boats. And they had to pay a fine. They were blamed for causing the war under Article 231, and that meant they had to pay reparations of 6.6 billion. This was set in 1921, and that's when Germany started paying it. As you can see, lamb is there. Can I suggest being aware of other words? Land could also be territory. I've seen it listed like that in other exam questions. And army could easily be the word military. So just be aware of those words can be used in the exams. Okay, so how did Germany react to this? Germany had agreed to the 14 points and removed their Kaiser and started a democracy before the Treaty of Versailles began. So they were extremely unhappy when there was a harsh treatment. Germany was horrified by the terms, but had to go and accept them or go back to war. So the Germans considered this a diktat on Germany. As you can see here in the cartoon, this German cartoon very much has the idea of the Germany being executed, being harshly treated. And it's the French symbol there, the guillotine, so French are to blame. So the German reactions in particular. So they lost 15% of industry with the coal and Silesia disappearing, and this made their economy weaker. Self-determination in their mind had failed as well. 6 million Germans now living in other countries. So it was one of the key points of the 14 points for a fair peace. But Germany suffered. 6 million Germans in the wrong country. Surely that is not a fair peace. And the League of Nations, Germany not allowed to join the League. So how could Germany join the world and be peaceful if it wasn't allowed to join the League of Nations? And of course, blame and reparations caused longer term problems for Germany. Germany was bankrupt after the war, and by 1923 Germany could not pay its reparations bills because it was paying debts from the war and also trying to pay reparations. It was too much. So the French and Belgians invaded the Ruhr to take goods and money directly from German factories. This was allowed under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And of course, France was a powerful member of the League of Nations. Germany was not in the League of Nations, so France sort of could do what it liked. So German workers refused to work for the French and went on strike. This was called passive resistance. And the German government printed money to try and pay the workers and keep the economy going. And this led to hyperinflation. And this, again, caused huge problems within Germany. So the reaction of the Germans to the Treaty of Versailles in these years 1919 to 1923 was that the whole thing was a disaster and was ruining Germany. As you can imagine, nationalists in Germany were very unhappy. What about reactions of the Allies? So France, many people were unhappy the treaty was not harsh enough. Some people had called for Germany to be destroyed altogether and put back to the condition it was before the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, where it was a group of separate states. And so Clemenceau lost the 1920 election due to the unpopularity of the people towards the Treaty of Versailles, suggesting that they wanted it far harsher. David Lloyd George described the treaty as a great pity. And Winston Churchill thought it was a fair treaty, wishes the various population prevailed in redrawing Europe. Winston Churchill's view probably was more akin to what people in Britain thought at the time, as many people had wanted a fairly harsh treaty. David Lloyd George, thinking it was a great pity, he, along with some other leaders, started to see that Germany was maybe too harshly punished, couldn't trade in the world, and there was going to be problems in the future. Woodrow Wilson from the USA had failed to get his 14 points into the treaty and was disappointed. When he returned to America, the Congress, the Parliament of America, rejected the treaty and rejected the League of Nations. So Wilson toured the USA trying to convince people to accept the treaty. But in 1921, Congress eventually rejected the treaty, and Wilson unfortunately died on his tour of America trying to convince people of this idea. The result of this was that the USA did not join the League of Nations.
Hello, please allow me to interrupt with a short announcement about revision guides that I offer. These revision guides are packed full of revision notes and videos to help you, quizzes to help you, and up to 15 exam questions explained per revision guide. So if you need help and you need all your revision notes and you want to know how to get a top answer for up to 15 different exam questions, then take a look at these revision guides. Also, if you want to know more or you want my help one-to-one, then take a look at my website to find out more about my revision guides and ways that I can offer help. Now, back to the video.
So finally, let's consider the peace treaties of the other Central Powers. And firstly, let's think about Austria. And they had the Treaty of Saint-Germain. They had to reduce their army to 30,000 men. They were not allowed conscription or a navy. They had reparations, but it was never set. Austria, due to all the changes made at the end of the war, went into a state of bankruptcy and chaos, and was deemed unfair to give them reparations. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken up, land was given to Italy and Romania, and new countries were created as it was broken up. For instance, Hungary was created as a nation. Italy, though, was upset at this. They wanted more land that they considered Italian, and that's why they fought against Austria in the war, because they thought they could get their territory increased. Particularly, they wanted an area called Fiume, and some Italian nationalists did invade that area in 1919, but without success. The creation of the new states was probably a mixed success of self-determination. They created Czechoslovakia out of Austro-Hungarian lands. So this was a new nation for the Czechs and Slovaks. As you can see, it's a combination of two groups of people. And today they are separate nations. So it was a bit of a compromise because they wanted strong nations to stand up to Germany and Russia if there were potential problems in the future. It didn't quite give people self-determination. Then we got the Treaty of Trianon for Hungary. Hungary lost land to Romania, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia and Austria. Reparations were agreed, but as the Hungarian economy also collapsed, they were never set. The army was reduced to 30,000 soldiers with no conscription, no air force. They were allowed 3 battleships in their navy. So this was quite a simple treaty of Trianon. But again, we do see the self-determination issues of Yugoslavia being created as a compromised nation and Czechoslovakia as well. So the Treaty of Neuilly punished Bulgaria. They lost land to Yugoslavia, Greece and Romania. They paid reparations of £100 million and their army was reduced to 20,000 soldiers. The more complicated one is Turkey. So they have 2 treaties. The first one, Treaty of Sèvres, punished in Turkey in August 1920. So they lost land to Greece and lost most of their European land except Constantinople. They lost control of the sea between their area in Europe and area in Asia, the area called the Dardanelles, that controlled the Mediterranean through to the Bosphorus. And this was because Britain, with their long-standing issues with Russia and the Crimean War in the 1800s, Britain wanted to control access to the Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire split up into different states, and Britain and France gave themselves some control of these new countries. Somebody who maybe is suspicious of their motives might consider that Britain and France were trying to control the oil in that region. Reparations were to be agreed, but it did not come to that. The impact of this led to a revolt and great instability in Turkey and led to the Turkish War of Independence. So the British decided upon a new treaty because of the chaos this had caused. And this was the Treaty of Lausanne, set against Turkey in 1923. The European land was given back. Control of the Dardanelles, which was Turkish territory, was given back. Turkey was allowed a bigger army. Reparations were cancelled. There was some greater independence given to some of the nations that Britain and France had taken over after the first treaty. So the impact was that other nations now started to challenge treaties. This was an example to Germany that if you complained enough, maybe your treaty would get cancelled. So Germany complained a lot in 1923 and stopped paying reparations, of course, and in the hope that their treaty might also be cancelled. Okay, well, I hope that gave you lots and lots of knowledge you need to help you answer the questions. I've given you a few hints towards how there might be wider links later on in the course and how it starts to connect together. But if you want to practice some exam questions, then do look at my tutoring videos so you can practice that, and do have a look at my revision guides full of these notes in detail and also more tutoring on how to answer questions. But bye-bye for now.